The glow from Oliver's laptop screen illuminated his 12-year-old face in my dimly lit sitting room, his fingers dancing across the keyboard with the kind of precision that both amazed and terrified me. My grandson had been visiting for the weekend, and while I appreciated his company, I had no idea that his computer games were actually something far more sophisticated and potentially dangerous. "Grandma Gigi, look what I did," Oliver said, with the excited pride of a child who had just mastered a new trick, completely unaware that he was about to turn my world upside down. I am Griselda Blackwood, 74 years old, and I'll be the first to admit that technology baffles me completely. I can barely manage to answer my smartphone without accidentally hanging up on people, and the idea of hacking sounds like something from a spy movie rather than something my sweet grandson would be capable of doing. "What exactly did you do, sweetheart?" I asked, settling into my favorite armchair beside him while trying to make sense of the colorful windows and text that filled his computer screen. "I hacked into Mom's phone," he announced cheerfully, as if he'd just told me he'd learned to ride a bicycle. "I've been practicing penetration testing. That's when you try to break into computer systems to find security weaknesses. Mom's phone was super easy because she uses the same password for everything." My heart skipped a beat as I processed what he'd just told me. "Oliver, dear, you broke into your mother's telephone? Isn't that illegal?" "It's only illegal if you do it to hurt people or steal things," he explained with the confidence of someone who had clearly researched this topic thoroughly. "I'm doing it to learn cybersecurity so I can protect people from bad hackers when I grow up." I had owned and operated the Grand Blackwood Hotel for 30 years, and during that time I'd dealt with all manner of difficult situations, but nothing in my hospitality experience had prepared me for navigating the ethics of my grandson's technological adventures. "Well, I suppose learning is important," I said uncertainly, "but perhaps you should ask your parents' permission before practicing on their devices." "But Grandma Gigi, that's not how security testing works. You can't ask permission because then people change their behavior and you don't get realistic results." The logic was sound, even if it made me uncomfortable. Oliver had always been exceptionally bright, reading at a high school level by age 8 and building complex electronic devices by 10. But his technical abilities far exceeded my capacity to understand them. "What exactly did you find on your mother's telephone?" "That's what I wanted to show you. Mom has this group chat that I think you should see." Oliver clicked through several screens of text messages, most of which appeared to be routine conversations about grocery lists, school schedules, and social plans. But then he opened something that made my blood run cold. "Look at this, Grandma Gigi. There's a group chat called Operation Get Rid of Griselda that was created 6 months ago." The name hit me like a physical blow. I stared at the screen, seeing my own name used in such a cruel context, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Oliver, that can't be right. Are you sure you're reading it correctly?" "I'm sure, Grandma. Look, there are 2,847 messages in this chat group. The participants are Mom, Dad, and someone called Thomas B. Thomas B. My brother, Thomas, who I'd trusted with my business affairs and family decisions for decades. Can you read some of the messages to me, sweetheart?" Oliver's expression grew troubled as he scrolled through the conversation thread. At 12 years old, he was old enough to understand that what he was seeing was wrong, even if he didn't fully comprehend the implications. Here's one from 6 months ago. Dad wrote, "We need to move forward with the incompetency plan before Mom starts giving away money to random charities or decides to remarry some fortune hunter." The words felt surreal, like hearing about someone else's life rather than my own. My son Marcus, who I had raised and supported and loved unconditionally, was discussing plans to have me declared incompetent. "Keep reading, Oliver." Mom replied, "I've already started documenting her forgetful moments. Last week she asked me the same question twice, and I got it on video. We need more evidence like that to build a strong case." "And Uncle Thomas?" Oliver's face scrunched up as he tried to pronounce some of the legal terminology. "Uncle Thomas wrote something about cognitive decline documentation and establishing patterns of diminished capacity for asset management." I felt dizzy as I tried to process what my grandson was telling me. For 6 months, my own family had been conspiring to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could take control of my finances and property. "Oliver, how many messages did you say were in this conversation?" 2,147 messages, Grandma Gigi. And I can see that some files have been shared too, photos and documents and stuff. Can you show me some of the photos? Oliver clicked on a media folder, and what appeared on screen made me gasp audibly. There were photographs of me that had been altered to make me look confused or disoriented. In one image, I appeared to be staring blankly at a coffee cup, as if I didn't know what it was. In another, I seemed to be wandering aimlessly around my own kitchen with a bewildered expression. Oliver, these photographs, they don't look right. I don't remember posing for pictures like this. That's because they're fake, Grandma Gigi. Someone used deepfake technology to change your facial expressions and make you look confused. Deepfake? It's when you use artificial intelligence to change someone's face in photos or videos to make them look like they're doing or saying things they never actually did. The sophistication of the deception was staggering. My family hadn't just been gossiping about my mental state. They had been manufacturing evidence to support their claims. Is there more, Oliver? There's a lot more. They've been planning something called the intervention for next week. They're going to have a fake doctor come to your birthday dinner to evaluate your mental condition. My 75th birthday was next Saturday, and Marcus and Claudia had been planning what they called a surprise celebration for weeks. Now I understood that it wasn't a celebration at all. It was an ambush designed to provide legal justification for taking away my independence and my assets. Oliver, I need you to save all of this information. Can you do that? I already did, Grandma Gigi. I saved everything to multiple backup drives, including the deleted files that they thought were gone forever. Deleted files? Yeah, people think that when you delete something from your phone, it disappears, but it doesn't really disappear until the phone writes new data over that space. I was able to recover hundreds of deleted messages where they talked about dividing up your money and property. My grandson, this brilliant 12-year-old boy, had uncovered a conspiracy that would have destroyed my life and stolen my life's work from me. But more than that, he had revealed that the people I trusted most in the world, my son, my daughter-in-law, and my brother, had been systematically planning to betray me for months. Oliver, I said, my voice shaking slightly, you've done something very important here. You may have saved your grandmother from something terrible. Are you going to call the police? I don't know yet, sweetheart. This is very complicated, and I need to think about how to handle it properly. What I didn't tell Oliver was that I was terrified. At 74 years old, I had thought my biggest concerns would be managing my health and enjoying my remaining years. I never imagined I would need to defend myself against my own family's attempts to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized. But as I looked at my grandson's earnest face, illuminated by the glow of evidence that could save or destroy our family, I realized that I wasn't as helpless as Marcus and Claudia believed. I had resources they didn't know about, connections they had never met, and most importantly, I had someone in my life who cared about me enough to help me fight back against this betrayal. The question was whether I had the courage to reach out to him, knowing that doing so would mean revealing a secret I had been keeping for 8 months out of fear of my family's judgment. Some secrets are kept to protect others from harm. This secret had been kept to protect me from embarrassment. But now, that same secret might be the key to protecting me from something far worse than embarrassment. That night, after Oliver had fallen asleep in the guest bedroom, I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone with the kind of anxiety I hadn't felt since the early days of running the Grand Blackwood Hotel. The evidence of my family's conspiracy was safely stored on Oliver's backup devices, but the weight of what I'd discovered was crushing down on me like a physical force. For 8 months, I had been carrying a secret that felt both wonderful and terrifying. William Sterling, Judge William Sterling, had been part of my life in ways that my family couldn't imagine, and I had been too afraid of their reactions to acknowledge the relationship publicly. William had first stayed at my hotel during a judicial conference last spring, and what began as professional courtesy had evolved into something I never expected to experience again at my age. He was intelligent, kind, and treated me with the kind of respect that reminded me of my late husband Harold, but without the protective condescension that had sometimes characterized even Harold's well-intentioned behavior. "Griselda," William had said during one of our private dinners, "you have one of the sharpest business minds I've encountered in 40 years of legal practice. Your insights about hospitality management could be applied to court administration in ways that would revolutionize judicial efficiency." Those conversations had been intoxicating. For decades, I had been surrounded by people who appreciated my financial success, but rarely acknowledged the intelligence and strategic thinking that had created that success. William saw me as a complete person, rather than just a wealthy widow. And that recognition had awakened feelings I thought were permanently buried with Harold. But I had been terrified of how Marcus and Claudia would react to learning that their 74-year-old mother was romantically involved with someone. The few times I had mentioned William's name casually, referring to him as a nice gentleman who stayed at the hotel, Claudia had made comments about older women who make fools of themselves chasing men, and Marcus had suggested that I should be careful about people who might be interested in your financial situation. So I had kept William separate from my family life, meeting him at restaurants outside my neighborhood, taking trips that I described as spa retreats or cultural excursions, and never mentioning the depth of our connection to anyone who might judge me for it. Now, staring at my phone at midnight, I realized that my fear of judgment had been misplaced. The real threat to my independence and dignity wasn't coming from a relationship with a good man who respected me. It was coming from family members who were actively plotting to destroy my autonomy. I scrolled through my contacts until I found William's number, my finger hovering over the call button as I wrestled with the decision that would change everything between us. If I called him now, if I asked for his help with this situation, I would have to admit that I had been hiding our relationship from my family for 8 months. I would have to explain that I had been so concerned about their opinions that I had chosen secrecy over honesty about one of the most meaningful aspects of my current life. But if I didn't call him, if I tried to handle Marcus and Claudia's conspiracy alone, I might lose everything I had worked to build over the past 50 years. My phone rang at 12:17 a.m., startling me so completely that I nearly dropped it. William's name appeared on the screen, and I realized that he must have sensed my distress in some way that defied logical explanation. "William?" I answered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Griselda, I'm sorry to call so late, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Are you all right?" The concern in his voice was so genuine, so immediate, that I began crying before I could stop myself. "William, I need help, and I don't know who else to turn to. What's happened? Are you hurt? Do you need me to come over?" "I'm not hurt physically, but I've discovered something about my family that—" "William, I'm in trouble, and it's the kind of trouble that requires legal expertise that I don't possess. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "But William, it's after midnight and—" "Griselda, if you're in trouble, then nothing else matters. Give me your address." The request stopped me cold. In 8 months of relationship, William had never been to my home because I had been afraid that neighbors might see him and report back to Marcus or Claudia. All of our time together had been in neutral locations where we were unlikely to be recognized by anyone connected to my family. "William, there's something I need to tell you about why I've never invited you to my house. We can discuss that when I get there. Right now, I just need to know that you're safe and that I can help with whatever is threatening you." I gave him my address, and while I waited for him to arrive, I tried to organize my thoughts about how to explain not just the conspiracy I'd discovered, but also the family dynamics that had made me so reluctant to introduce him to Marcus and Claudia. When William arrived, still wearing a suit despite the late hour, he looked every inch the distinguished federal judge he had been for 25 years before his retirement, but his expression was filled with personal concern rather than professional detachment. "Griselda, what's going on?" I led him to the kitchen where Oliver's laptop was still open, displaying screenshots of the conspiracy messages that my grandson had saved before going to bed. My 12-year-old grandson hacked into his mother's phone today as a technology exercise. What he found was a group chat between my son, my daughter-in-law, and my brother, planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so they can take control of my assets. William's expression shifted from concern to professional alarm as he processed what I was telling him. "Show me what he found." For the next hour, I walked William through everything Oliver had discovered. The 2008-47 messages planning my institutionalization, the deepfake photographs designed to make me appear confused and disoriented, the fake medical evaluation scheduled for my birthday dinner, and the detailed plans for dividing my property among the 3 conspirators. William's questions were precise and methodical, reflecting decades of experience with financial fraud cases and family disputes. But underneath his professional competence, I could see genuine anger building as he understood the scope of what my family had been planning. "Griselda, This is criminal conspiracy to commit fraud against an elderly person. The use of deepfake technology to manufacture evidence makes it a federal case involving wire fraud and identity manipulation. What does that mean practically? It means that if we handle this correctly, your son, daughter-in-law, and brother could face significant prison time for what they've attempted to do to you. And if we don't handle it correctly, then you could find yourself declared incompetent and institutionalized based on fabricated evidence, while they liquidate your assets and claim legal authority over your medical and financial decisions. The stark reality of my situation began to sink in fully. Without Oliver's accidental discovery, I would have walked into my own birthday dinner next Saturday, completely unprepared for an ambush that could have cost me my freedom, my independence, and my life's work. William, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Are you willing to help me fight this conspiracy, even though it means getting involved in a very messy family situation that could become public and complicated? Griselda, I would be willing to help you fight this conspiracy under any circumstances, because what they're planning is unconscionable. But I'm especially willing to help because... He paused, looking directly into my eyes, with an expression that contained both affection and determination. Because I care about you more than I think you realize, and because I've been hoping for months that you would trust me enough to let me be part of your real life instead of keeping me separate from the people and situations that matter to you. Some secrets are revealed through choice, others are revealed through necessity. My 8-month secret about William was about to become the foundation for saving everything I had built over the past 74 years. The next morning, William arrived at my house at precisely 9 o'clock, carrying 2 large coffee cups and a leather briefcase that suggested he had spent the early hours preparing for what he called our strategic planning session. Oliver was awake and eager to demonstrate his technological findings to someone who could appreciate their legal significance. Judge Sterling, Oliver said, with the kind of formality that 12-year-olds use when trying to impress important adults. I've prepared a comprehensive digital evidence package that includes metadata analysis, recovery timestamps, and verification protocols for all the conspiracy communications. William looked impressed, despite himself. Oliver, that's exactly the kind of documentation that prosecutors need to build strong cases in federal court. How did you learn to organize evidence so systematically? I've been reading about cybersecurity law and digital forensics because I want to work for the FBI someday. I know that evidence has to be collected and preserved properly, or it gets thrown out in court. Your grandmother is very fortunate to have someone with your skills and integrity looking out for her welfare. I watched this interaction between William and Oliver with a mixture of pride and regret. This was the first time in 8 months that William was meeting any member of my family, and the circumstances were far from what I had imagined when I occasionally fantasized about introducing him to the people I loved most. Oliver, I said gently, Judge Sterling and I need to discuss some adult legal matters. Would you mind working on your computer projects in the guest room for a while? Sure, Grandma Gigi. But if you need me to explain any of the technical evidence, just call me. Some of the deepfake detection stuff is pretty complicated. After Oliver left the room, William opened his briefcase and pulled out several folders filled with legal documents and research materials. Griselda, I spent most of last night researching precedent cases involving family conspiracy to defraud elderly relatives. What your son, daughter-in-law, and brother are attempting is more common than you might think, but it's also more serious legally than they probably realize. What do you mean? Most family financial exploitation involves taking advantage of actual cognitive decline or physical vulnerability. But manufacturing evidence of incompetency using deepfake technology transforms this from civil fraud into federal criminal conspiracy. William spread several legal documents across my kitchen table, pointing to highlighted sections that outlined various criminal statutes and potential penalties. The wire fraud charges alone could result in 20 years in federal prison. Add the elder abuse enhancement, the conspiracy charges, and the identity manipulation aspects, and we're looking at sentences that could effectively be life imprisonment for people in their 40s and 70s. The severity of the potential consequences was staggering. I had been thinking about this situation as a family betrayal that needed to be addressed, but William was describing it as serious criminal activity that could destroy multiple lives. William, I need to ask you something difficult. Do you think there's any possibility that Marcus genuinely believes I'm becoming incompetent, and that this conspiracy is motivated by concern for my welfare rather than greed? That's a fair question, and it's something we need to consider carefully. Let's look at the evidence Oliver recovered and see what motivations are documented in their own communications. William pulled out printouts of the conspiracy messages and began reading through them systematically, looking for language that might suggest genuine concern versus financial opportunism. Here's a message from your brother Thomas, dated 4 months ago. We need to accelerate the timeline before Griselda decides to remarry or makes any major charitable commitments. Once she's declared incompetent, we can reverse any problematic financial decisions she might make. What does that suggest to you? It suggests that they're not concerned about your cognitive abilities. They're concerned about your financial independence. The reference to remarriage is particularly telling. I felt my cheeks flush as I realized that my family's conspiracy might be partially motivated by suspicions about my relationship with William, even though they had never met him or been told about him directly. William, I think there's something you should know about why Thomas mentioned remarriage concerns. What is it? Over the past few months, I've made some comments about feeling less lonely, about having new interests and social activities. I never mentioned you specifically, but I think they may have suspected that I was developing relationships outside of family control. And that possibility motivated them to accelerate their timeline for having you declared incompetent? It appears so. William was quiet for several minutes while he processed the implications of what I'd told him. When he finally spoke, his voice carried both professional analysis and personal anger. Griselda, this means that part of their conspiracy was motivated by the possibility that you might find happiness and companionship that would interfere with their inheritance expectations. Is that relevant legally? It's extremely relevant because it demonstrates premeditation and financial motivation rather than genuine concern for your welfare. It also means that they view your personal relationships as threats to their economic interests. The conversation was interrupted by Oliver's voice calling from the guest room. Grandma Gigi, Judge Sterling, you need to see this. I found something really important. We rushed to the guest room where Oliver was staring at his laptop screen with an expression of excitement mixed with alarm. What did you find, sweetheart? I was doing deeper analysis of the deleted files, and I found a conversation thread that was permanently deleted 3 weeks ago. It's about the fake doctor they hired to evaluate you. William leaned over Oliver's shoulder to read the recovered messages on the screen. What does it say? Oliver scrolled through the deleted conversation while reading the most significant parts aloud. Dad wrote, "The actor we hired to play Dr. Harrison has extensive experience portraying medical professionals in pharmaceutical commercials. He's been briefed on the specific diagnosis terminology needed to justify institutionalization." An actor? I gasped. Mom replied, "I've coached him on your typical behavioral patterns and speech habits, so his evaluation will seem authentic. He'll recommend immediate supervised care based on progressive dementia symptoms." William's expression grew increasingly grim as Oliver continued reading. And Uncle Thomas wrote, "I've prepared the legal paperwork to implement conservatorship immediately following the medical evaluation. We can have Griselda transported to the Willowbrook Care Facility within hours of the diagnosis." Willowbrook Care Facility, William repeated. I know that institution. It's a high-security memory care facility that specializes in patients with advanced dementia who require complete supervision. The reality of what my family had been planning hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just trying to control my finances, they were planning to have me institutionalized in a facility for people with severe cognitive impairment based on a fake medical evaluation performed by an actor. "Oliver," I said, my voice shaking, "please save all of this new evidence with the other materials." "I already did, Grandma Gigi. I also found financial records showing that they've already paid the actor $5,000 and put down a $25,000 deposit at the Willowbrook facility." "They've already paid for my institutionalization?" William stood up and began pacing around the small guest room, his legal mind clearly working through the implications of this new evidence. "Griselda, this changes everything. They've moved beyond planning and conspiracy into active implementation. The fake medical evaluation is scheduled for tomorrow evening, which means we have less than 36 hours to prevent them from executing a plan that could result in your immediate institutionalization. What do we do?" We coordinate with federal authorities to document their attempted fraud in real time, while simultaneously protecting you from being declared incompetent based on fabricated evidence. Some family betrayals can be addressed through conversation and forgiveness. This family betrayal required federal law enforcement intervention to prevent its successful completion, and we had less than 36 hours to save my freedom, my independence, and possibly my life. William spent most of Monday morning on the phone with federal prosecutors, FBI agents, and colleagues from his years on the federal bench, building what he called a coordinated response framework to my family's conspiracy. I sat in my kitchen listening to one side of conversations that sounded like they belonged in a crime drama rather than my actual life. Yes, Agent Martinez, we have comprehensive digital evidence of conspiracy to commit elder fraud using fabricated medical documentation and deepfake technology. Tomorrow evening at the subject's residence, the fake medical professional is scheduled to arrive at 7 p.m. We need real-time monitoring to document the attempted fraud as it occurs. Oliver had spent the morning creating what he called a digital evidence presentation that organized 6 months of conspiracy communications into chronological order with technical analysis explaining how the deepfake images had been created and manipulated. Grandma Gigi, Oliver said as he showed me his work, I want you to understand exactly what they did to those photos of you, because it's really important that you know this wasn't your fault or your confusion. What do you mean, sweetheart? Look at this original photo from your birthday last year. This is what you actually looked like when Dad took the picture. Oliver showed me a photograph of myself at my 74th birthday celebration, smiling normally while holding a piece of cake, surrounded by family members who were apparently already planning my institutionalization. Now look at what they did to the same photo. He clicked to another version of the same image, where my facial expression had been altered to appear vacant and confused, my eyes unfocused, my smile replaced with a bewildered expression that suggested cognitive impairment. They used artificial intelligence software to change your facial expression frame by frame. To anyone who wasn't a technology expert, this would look like genuine photographic evidence of mental decline. The sophistication of the manipulation was breathtaking and terrifying. My own family had used cutting-edge technology to create false evidence of my mental incompetence, evidence that would have seemed completely authentic to medical professionals, legal authorities, and anyone else who might have been involved in evaluating my cognitive status. Oliver, how many photographs did they alter? 47 photos spanning the past 8 months. They created an entire timeline of supposed cognitive decline that would support their claims about progressive dementia. William finished his phone conversation and joined us at the kitchen table, where Oliver's evidence was displayed across my laptop screen. The federal response team is in place, William announced. Tomorrow evening, FBI agents will be monitoring your property from unmarked vehicles, recording equipment will document the attempted fraud as it occurs, and federal prosecutors will be standing by to authorize immediate arrests. What exactly will happen during the dinner? You'll proceed with the family celebration as if you have no knowledge of their conspiracy. The actor posing as Dr. Harrison will arrive and attempt to conduct his fake medical evaluation. We'll allow the fraud to proceed far enough to establish clear criminal intent. Then federal agents will intervene and make arrests. And what about Oliver? I don't want him to witness his parents being arrested by federal agents. William had apparently anticipated this concern. Oliver will spend tomorrow evening with my daughter Rebecca and her family. She's a pediatric psychologist who specializes in helping children cope with family trauma, and she's agreed to provide appropriate support while the arrests are taking place. You have a daughter? I asked, realizing how much about William's personal life I still didn't know, despite our 8-month relationship. Rebecca is 38, married, with 2 children of her own. She's been asking to meet you for months, actually. She thinks I've been remarkably secretive about my social life lately. The comment reminded me that I hadn't been the only one keeping our relationship private. William had apparently been as cautious about introducing me to his family as I had been about introducing him to mine, though his caution seemed to have been motivated by respect for my preferences rather than fear of family judgment. William, after tomorrow night, assuming everything goes according to plan, there won't be any reason to keep our relationship secret anymore. How do you feel about that? Terrified and relieved in equal measure. The rest of Monday was spent in detailed preparation for what William called the controlled exposure of active fraud. FBI agents visited my house to install monitoring equipment, federal prosecutors briefed me on my role in documenting the conspiracy, and Oliver created backup copies of all evidence in case his original files were somehow compromised. "Mrs. Blackwood," said Agent Martinez, the lead FBI investigator, "tomorrow evening will require you to act naturally while your family attempts to have you declared incompetent. Do you feel capable of maintaining that performance while knowing what they're trying to do to you?" "Agent Martinez, I operated a major hotel for 30 years. I've dealt with difficult customers, dishonest employees, and complex business crises that required me to maintain composure while handling serious problems behind the scenes. I think I can manage one evening with my treacherous family." "Good. Remember that we need clear evidence of their intent to defraud you before we can intervene. The fake doctor will need to actually begin his fraudulent medical evaluation, and your family will need to demonstrate their active participation in the conspiracy." That evening, Marcus called to confirm details for my surprise birthday dinner. "Mom, we're so excited about tomorrow night. Claudia has planned something really special, and we've invited some people who we think will make the celebration particularly meaningful for you." "That sounds wonderful, dear. Who will be attending?" "Just family and a few close friends." "Oh, and Claudia met a fascinating doctor who specializes in geriatric medicine. She thought you might enjoy meeting him since you've been interested in staying healthy and active as you age." The casual way Marcus introduced the fake medical evaluation made my stomach turn. He was lying to me with such practiced ease that I wondered how many other deceptions I had been accepting without question over the years. "That sounds very thoughtful of Claudia. I look forward to meeting him. Mom, I want you to know how much we love you and how important your well-being is to all of us." "I love you too, Marcus." The conversation ended with my son expressing affection and concern that I now knew was completely fabricated, designed to establish his caring intentions before he attempted to have me institutionalized based on fraudulent medical evidence. After I hung up, William found me sitting in my kitchen staring at my phone with what must have been a devastated expression. "Griselda, what's wrong?" I keep thinking about all the times over the past 6 months when Marcus and Claudia seemed so concerned about my health, so interested in my daily activities, so supportive of my independence. Now I realize that every expression of care was actually data collection for their conspiracy. I'm sorry that this betrayal is so complete and calculated, but tomorrow night, we're going to stop them from destroying your life, and we're going to hold them accountable for what they've attempted to do to you. And after tomorrow night, you'll be free to live your life without fear of manipulation or exploitation by people who should have been protecting you instead of preying on you. Some family dinners celebrate milestones and create happy memories. Tomorrow's family dinner was going to expose criminal conspiracy and result in multiple arrests, but it was also going to free me from 6 months of unknowing victimization by the people I trusted most in the world. Tuesday evening arrived with unseasonably warm weather for late October, and I spent an hour choosing my outfit for what would either be my last family dinner or my liberation from 6 months of calculated deception. I selected a navy blue dress that Harold had always said made me look distinguished, appropriate attire for what William described as the most important performance of your life. Oliver had left for his evening with William's daughter Rebecca at 4 o'clock, carrying his laptop bag and expressing the kind of nervous excitement that 12-year-olds show when they know something dramatic is about to happen, but aren't entirely sure what to expect. "Grandma Gigi," he said as William picked him up, "remember that everything I found on Mom's phone proves that you're not confused or forgetful. You're one of the smartest people I know, and I'm proud that you're my grandmother." The sincerity in his voice nearly brought me to tears, particularly because I realized that after tonight, Oliver's relationship with his parents would be fundamentally altered by witnessing their arrest for conspiracy to defraud his beloved grandmother. At 6:30, Marcus and Claudia arrived with elaborate flower arrangements and what appeared to be professionally catered appetizers, setting up my dining room as if they were truly planning a celebration rather than an ambush designed to end my independence. "Mom, you look absolutely beautiful," Claudia said with the kind of effusive warmth that I now recognized as performance rather than genuine affection. 75 years old and still so elegant. We're lucky to have such a wonderful matriarch in our family. Thank you, dear. This all looks lovely. Thomas arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a bottle of expensive champagne and wearing the expression of someone who believed he was about to successfully execute a complex legal maneuver. Griselda, happy birthday, sister. 75 years of wisdom and grace. You're an inspiration to all of us. Thomas, how kind of you to say. The three of them worked with practiced coordination to transform my dining room into an elegant party space, and I found myself genuinely impressed by their attention to detail. If I hadn't known about their conspiracy, I would have been deeply moved by what appeared to be a loving family's effort to create a memorable celebration. At 7 o'clock precisely, the doorbell rang with the kind of timing that suggested careful choreography rather than casual arrival. That must be Dr. Harrison, Claudia said brightly. I told you about him, Mom. The geriatric specialist I met at the wellness conference. He was so interested in meeting you when I described your active lifestyle and sharp mind. Marcus answered the door and returned with a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a medical bag that appeared authentically professional. The actor they had hired was clearly skilled at his craft. Mrs. Blackwood, what an honor to meet you, Dr. Harrison said, extending his hand with the kind of professional warmth that medical doctors cultivate through years of practice. Claudia has told me so much about your remarkable energy and independence. I specialize in helping people your age maintain cognitive sharpness and physical vitality as they navigate the challenges of aging. How thoughtful of Claudia to arrange this introduction. Through the dining room windows, I could see the unmarked FBI surveillance vehicles positioned strategically around my property, and I knew that federal agents were documenting every word of the conversation that was about to unfold. We proceeded through dinner conversation that felt surreal in its normalcy. Marcus discussed his consulting work, Claudia described her latest fitness clients, Thomas shared stories from his legal career, and Dr. Harrison asked seemingly innocent questions about my daily routines, social activities, and general health status. Mrs. Blackwood, Claudia mentioned that you sometimes have difficulty remembering appointments or managing complex tasks. How would you describe your experience with those challenges? I'm not aware of having significant difficulties with appointments or complex tasks, I replied honestly. Of course. Many people in your situation aren't fully aware of the changes that others notice. That's perfectly normal. The conversation continued with Dr. Harrison asking increasingly leading questions designed to elicit responses that could be interpreted as evidence of cognitive decline, while my family members provided supportive commentary that reinforced his suggestions about my supposed mental deterioration. Dr. Harrison, Thomas said during dessert, we've been concerned about Griselda's judgment regarding financial decisions. She's been talking about making some major charitable commitments that seem impulsive. And she's been mentioning new social relationships that worry us, Claudia added. At her age, we're concerned about her vulnerability to people who might take advantage of her generosity. These are very common concerns with aging adults, Dr. Harrison replied, with practiced sympathy. Mrs. Blackwood, how do you feel about your family's observations regarding your recent decision-making? I feel that my family may be misinterpreting my desire for independence and new experiences as signs of impaired judgment. That kind of defensive response often indicates diminished self-awareness about cognitive changes. Mrs. Blackwood, would you be willing to undergo a brief cognitive assessment so we can determine the best ways to support your continued well-being? This was the moment William had warned me about, when the fake medical evaluation would begin in earnest, providing the fraudulent evidence needed to justify my institutionalization. What kind of assessment, Dr. Harrison? Just some simple questions and tasks to evaluate memory, reasoning, and judgment. Nothing stressful or complicated. Dr. Harrison opened his medical bag and withdrew what appeared to be legitimate psychological testing materials, along with forms that I assumed were designed to document my supposed cognitive impairment. Let's start with some basic orientation questions. Mrs. Blackwood, what year is it? 2024. And what month? October. Very good. Now, can you tell me what you had for breakfast this morning? Toast with jam and coffee. And can you remember what you did yesterday afternoon? I could see Marcus, Claudia, and Thomas watching this exchange with barely concealed anticipation, clearly expecting Dr. Harrison's questions to reveal evidence of memory problems that would support their conspiracy. Yesterday afternoon I spent time with my grandson Oliver, helping him with a computer project. I see. Your family mentioned that you sometimes have difficulty with technology and modern devices. Can you describe your experience using computers or smartphones? I have limited experience with technology, but I'm learning with Oliver's help. Dr. Harrison made notes on his forms while nodding with the kind of professional concern that suggested he was documenting problematic responses rather than normal answers. Mrs. Blackwood, I'd like to try a more complex reasoning exercise. If you had $100 and you spent $37 on groceries and $28 on gas, how much money would you have remaining? $35. And if you needed to tip a restaurant server 20% on a $60 meal, how much would you tip? $12. More note-taking, more concerned nodding, more glances between my family members that suggested the evaluation was proceeding according to their planned timeline. Mrs. Blackwood, based on this preliminary assessment, I'm seeing some indicators that concern me regarding your capacity for independent decision-making, particularly around financial and social judgments. What kind of indicators? Subtle signs of diminished awareness about your own limitations, combined with your family's observations about recent changes in your behavior and decision-making patterns. This was it. The moment when the fake doctor would recommend my institutionalization based on fabricated evidence and fraudulent medical opinion. Dr. Harrison, what are you recommending? I believe you would benefit from supervised care in a specialized facility where trained professionals can help you navigate the challenges of aging while ensuring your safety and well-being. Through the dining room windows, I could see FBI agents moving into position around my house. The fraud was about to be exposed, the arrests were about to be made, and my family was about to discover that their conspiracy had been documented by federal law enforcement from the very beginning. Some medical evaluations are designed to help patients maintain their independence. This medical evaluation was designed to justify stealing mine, but it was about to become evidence in a federal criminal case instead. Dr. Harrison, I said, maintaining the composure that 30 years of hotel management had taught me. Could you be more specific about what kind of supervised care facility you're recommending? Well, Mrs. Blackwood, based on what I've observed this evening, I believe you would benefit from the comprehensive support services available at Willowbrook Care Facility. They specialize in patients who require assistance with daily decision-making and financial management. The mention of Willowbrook, the exact facility Oliver had discovered in the deleted messages, sent a chill through me, but I forced myself to respond as if I were genuinely considering his recommendation. That sounds quite expensive. How would such care be financed? Oh, don't worry about the financial aspects, Thomas interjected smoothly. Marcus and I have been researching the best ways to manage your assets to ensure you receive proper care without depleting your resources unnecessarily. We've already spoken with Willowbrook about their admission process, Claudia added helpfully. They have an opening available immediately, which is quite fortunate given their usual waiting lists. Marcus nodded in agreement. Mom, we know this is overwhelming, but Dr. Harrison's assessment confirms what we've all been noticing about your increasing confusion and poor judgment. We just want what's best for you. And what about my house, my personal belongings? We'll handle all of those details, Thomas assured me. I've prepared power of attorney documents that will allow us to manage your property and assets efficiently while you focus on your health and recovery. Dr. Harrison reached into his medical bag and withdrew a clipboard with official-looking forms already partially completed. Mrs. Blackwood, if you could just sign these medical evaluation forms, we can begin the process of getting you the care you need. This was the critical moment when they would attempt to obtain my signature on documents that would authorize my institutionalization based on fraudulent medical assessment. Dr. Harrison, before I sign anything, could you explain your medical qualifications and licensing information? I'd like to understand your expertise in geriatric psychiatry. The question seemed to surprise him, and I watched his confident demeanor falter slightly as he realized he hadn't prepared for inquiries about his credentials. Of course, Mrs. Blackwood. I'm board certified in internal medicine with additional specialization in cognitive assessment for elderly patients. Which medical school did you attend? Harvard Medical School, class of 1982. And your residency training? Massachusetts General Hospital, internal medicine residency from 1982 to 1986. The answers were smooth and well rehearsed. suggesting that whoever had coached this actor had provided him with a detailed fictional background that would sound impressive to laypeople. Dr. Harrison, could I see your medical license and board certification documents? I like to verify credentials before making important healthcare decisions. Now he looked genuinely uncomfortable, glancing at Marcus and Claudia with an expression that suggested this wasn't part of their prepared script. Mrs. Blackwood, I don't typically carry physical copies of licensing documents when making house calls, but I assure you that all of my credentials are properly filed with the state medical board. I understand. What's your medical license number? I can verify it online right now. Mom, Marcus interrupted. This level of suspicion about Dr. Harrison's qualifications is exactly the kind of paranoid thinking that concerns us about your mental state. Questioning medical credentials is paranoid thinking? When you're interrogating a respected physician who has generously agreed to evaluate you in your own home, yes, it suggests diminished trust and judgment. Claudia reached across the table and patted my hand with practiced sympathy. Mom Blackwood, we know this is scary, but you need to trust us to help you make good decisions. Dr. Harrison is trying to help you. What's your medical license number, Dr. Harrison? I repeated, ignoring Claudia's condescending reassurance. Through the dining room windows, I could see additional movement from the FBI surveillance team, and I suspected that they were preparing for immediate intervention as soon as the fraud attempt became sufficiently documented. Mrs. Blackwood, Dr. Harrison said with increasing nervousness, perhaps we should focus on getting you the care you need rather than getting bogged down in bureaucratic details about licensing verification. The care I need based on what diagnostic criteria? Based on the cognitive assessment we just completed, which clearly indicated that I can perform basic arithmetic, remember recent events, and answer orientation questions correctly. I interrupted. That hardly seems like evidence of dementia requiring immediate institutionalization. Thomas leaned forward with the expression he had always used when attempting to assert legal authority in family discussions. Griselda, you're being unreasonably difficult about this. We're all concerned about your welfare, and Dr. Harrison's professional opinion confirms our observations about your declining mental capacity. What specific examples of declining mental capacity have you observed, Thomas? Well, your increased social activity with people we don't know, your talk about making major financial decisions without consulting family, your resistance to reasonable suggestions about safety and health precautions. So, my independence is evidence of mental incapacity? Your poor judgment about appropriate behavior for a woman your age is evidence of diminished cognitive function, Claudia said with barely concealed impatience. Mom Blackwood, normal 75-year-old women don't start acting like teenagers with secret social lives and mysterious new interests. The comment about secret social lives made me realize that they suspected more about my relationship with William than I had understood, and that their timeline for institutionalizing me might be motivated by fears about my romantic involvement interfering with their inheritance plans. What secret social life are you referring to, Claudia? The mysterious appointments you won't discuss, the phone calls you take in private, the unexplained absences when we try to visit you. Marcus nodded in agreement. Mom, healthy people your age don't have secrets from their families about how they spend their time or who they spend it with, don't they? Mrs. Blackwood, Dr. Harrison interrupted. This kind of defensive questioning and resistance to family concern is exactly what I would expect from someone experiencing early-stage dementia with paranoid ideation. Paranoid ideation? The belief that people are conspiring against you when they're actually trying to help you. The irony of his statement was so complete that I almost laughed aloud. The fake doctor was describing my suspicion of their actual conspiracy as evidence of paranoid delusion requiring psychiatric intervention. Dr. Harrison, what would you say if I told you that I have evidence that this entire medical evaluation is fraudulent, that you're not actually a licensed physician, and that my family has been conspiring for 6 months to have me declared incompetent so they can control my assets? The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in my hallway. Mom, Marcus said carefully, that kind of elaborate paranoid thinking is exactly what we've been worried about. Is it paranoid thinking, Marcus, or is it accurate assessment of what's actually happening in this room tonight? At precisely that moment, my front doorbell rang with the distinctive sound of law enforcement arrival. 3 sharp, authoritative chimes that announced the end of my family's conspiracy and the beginning of their federal prosecution. "Mrs. Blackwood," called a voice from my front porch. "This is Special Agent Martinez with the FBI. We have a warrant to enter and investigate suspected elder fraud in progress." The expressions on my family's faces shifted from confusion to alarm to absolute terror as they realized that their carefully planned conspiracy had been exposed and documented by federal law enforcement. Dr. Harrison dropped his clipboard and reached for his medical bag as if preparing to flee, while Marcus, Claudia, and Thomas stared at each other with the stunned silence of people who had just discovered that their criminal activity had been under federal surveillance. Some birthday parties end with cake and happy memories. My 75th birthday party was about to end with handcuffs and federal arrests. But it was also about to begin my liberation from 6 months of manipulation by the people who should have been protecting me instead of plotting to destroy my independence. The FBI agents entered my dining room with the kind of professional efficiency that transforms a family gathering into a federal crime scene within minutes. Special Agent Martinez, whom I had met briefly during the preparation phase, approached the table where my family sat frozen in various stages of shock and growing panic. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are federal agents investigating conspiracy to commit elder fraud, wire fraud, and identity manipulation. Please remain seated while we verify identifications and explain the situation." Dr. Harrison, or whatever his real name was, made a desperate attempt to maintain his medical professional persona, even as federal agents surrounded him. "Officers, I think there's been some misunderstanding. I'm Dr. Robert Harrison, and I was conducting a routine geriatric assessment at the request of this family." "Sir," Agent Martinez replied, "we have comprehensive evidence that you are James McCarthy, an actor residing in Stamford, Connecticut, who was paid $5,000 to impersonate a medical professional for the purpose of providing fraudulent psychiatric evaluation." The blood drained from the fake doctor's face as he realized the scope of what federal investigators had discovered about the conspiracy. "Furthermore," Agent Martinez continued, "we have recordings of this entire evening's conversation, including your attempts to convince Mrs. Blackwood to sign institutionalization forms based on fabricated medical assessment." Marcus found his voice first, though it came out as more of a croak than his usual confident tone. "This is insane. We were trying to help my mother get appropriate medical care for her declining mental condition. Mr. Blackwood, we have 6 months of digital communications between you, your wife, and your uncle documenting your conspiracy to have your mother declared incompetent using manufactured evidence, including deepfake photographs and fraudulent medical evaluation." Claudia's composure cracked completely as the reality of federal prosecution began to sink in. "We never meant to hurt anyone. We were concerned about Griselda's judgment and her vulnerability to people who might take advantage of her." "Mrs. Blackwood," Agent Martinez said, addressing Claudia, "we have evidence that you used advanced technology to create false photographic evidence of cognitive impairment, paid for fraudulent medical evaluation, and made deposits at a secured care facility to arrange your mother-in-law's institutionalization against her will." Thomas, with his legal background, understood the severity of the charges better than Marcus or Claudia, and his face had gone completely white as he processed the federal implications of what they had attempted. "Agent Martinez, I think we need to discuss this situation with legal representation present. Mr. Thomas Blackwood, you have the right to remain silent and to have an attorney present during questioning. However, we are executing arrest warrants based on evidence of federal crimes, including conspiracy to defraud an elderly person, wire fraud, and elder abuse." The formal reading of Miranda rights began as FBI agents placed handcuffs on Marcus, Claudia, Thomas, and the fake Dr. Harrison, while I sat at my own dining table watching my family's conspiracy collapse into federal criminal prosecution. "Mrs. Blackwood," Agent Martinez said, turning to me with professional courtesy, "are you prepared to provide formal testimony about tonight's events and the conspiracy you discovered through your grandson's investigation?" "Yes, I am. And Judge Sterling has agreed to serve as your legal representative during the formal statement process?" "He has." As if summoned by his name, William appeared in my dining room, having apparently been waiting outside until the arrests were completed. He looked every inch the distinguished federal judge, but his expression contained personal concern for my welfare rather than professional detachment. Griselda, are you all right? I'm fine, William. Shaken, but fine. The evidence package that Oliver prepared has been invaluable for establishing the scope and timeline of the conspiracy, Agent Martinez informed us. That young man's technical skills and ethical integrity have likely saved his grandmother from serious harm. As my family members were led out of my house in handcuffs, Marcus turned back to look at me with an expression that contained confusion, anger, and what might have been genuine remorse. Mom, who is this man? How did you know about our plans? How did federal agents get involved in a private family matter? Marcus, this man is Judge William Sterling, the man I've been romantically involved with for 8 months, but was afraid to introduce to you because I thought you might disapprove of your elderly mother having a personal relationship. You've been dating someone for 8 months? Without telling us? I've been dating someone for 8 months without telling you because your wife made comments about older women who make fools of themselves chasing men, and you suggested I should be careful about people interested in my financial situation. But how did you know about our conversations? How did you get access to evidence of our planning? Your 12-year-old son hacked into Claudia's phone as a technology exercise and discovered your conspiracy by accident. Oliver saved every message, every deleted file, and every piece of evidence documenting your plans to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized. The look of devastation that crossed Marcus's face as he realized his own son had been responsible for exposing the conspiracy was almost heartbreaking, despite everything he had done to betray my trust. Oliver knows about all of this. Oliver knows that his parents were planning to hurt his grandmother through fraud and deception, and he chose to protect me rather than protect you. Mrs. Blackwood, Agent Martinez interrupted, we need to complete the arrest process and transport the subjects for federal booking. You'll need to come to our offices tomorrow morning to provide formal testimony for the prosecution case. After my family and the fake doctor were removed from my house, William and I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of what had been intended as my birthday celebration, but had become the scene of a federal crime investigation. Griselda, how are you processing what just happened? I feel relieved that the conspiracy has been stopped, devastated that my own family could plan something so cruel, and grateful that Oliver had the courage and skills to expose what they were doing. And how are you feeling about our relationship no longer being secret? Terrified and liberated simultaneously. For 8 months, I've been worried about what Marcus and Claudia would think about me being romantically involved at my age. Now I realize that their opinions about my personal relationships were motivated by concerns about inheritance rather than genuine care for my well-being. William reached across the table and took my hands with the kind of gentle strength that had attracted me to him from our first conversation at the Grand Blackwood Hotel. Griselda, I want you to know that helping you tonight wasn't just about preventing elder fraud or exposing criminal conspiracy. It was about protecting someone I care about deeply from people who were willing to destroy her independence and dignity for financial gain. William, what happens now? With the legal case, with my family, with us? The legal case will proceed through federal court, where your family will likely face significant prison sentences for the crimes they attempted to commit. Your family relationships will need to be rebuilt from scratch, if that's even possible after this level of betrayal. And our relationship can finally be open and honest, instead of hidden and compartmentalized. And Oliver? Oliver will need significant support to process the trauma of discovering his parents' criminal behavior and watching them be arrested. But he'll also need recognition for the courage he showed in protecting his grandmother from serious harm. That night, after William left, and I was alone in my house for the first time in months, without fear of family manipulation, I called Oliver at Rebecca Sterling's house to check on his emotional state. Grandma Gigi, are Mom and Dad going to prison? They're going to face serious legal consequences for what they tried to do, sweetheart. Good. What they were planning was really mean, and you didn't deserve to be treated like that. Oliver, I want you to know how proud I am of you for having the integrity to protect me even when it meant exposing your parents' wrongdoing. Grandma Gigi, you're the best person I know. I couldn't let them hurt you. Some families are connected by blood and obligation. The family I was building with Oliver and William was connected by choice, integrity, and mutual protection rather than genetic relationship or social expectation. And that family was going to be stronger than anything my biological relatives had ever created through manipulation and greed. 3 months after the arrests, I sat in the federal courthouse watching Marcus, Claudia, Thomas, and James McCarthy, the fake Dr. Harrison, receive their sentences for conspiracy to commit elder fraud. Oliver sat beside me, now living permanently in my house under a custody arrangement that recognized him as a victim of his parents' criminal behavior rather than an accessory to their conspiracy. The defendant's use of sophisticated technology to manufacture evidence of cognitive decline represents a particularly egregious form of elder abuse, Judge Patricia Henley announced from the bench. This conspiracy could have resulted in the victim's indefinite institutionalization based entirely on fabricated medical and photographic evidence. Marcus received 4 years in federal prison. Claudia received 3.5 years. Thomas received 5 years due to his role as the legal architect of the conspiracy. And James McCarthy received 2 years for his participation as the fraudulent medical professional. Furthermore, Judge Henley continued, the court is ordering full financial restitution to Mrs. Blackwood for legal fees, investigative costs, and emotional damages, plus forfeiture of any inheritance rights or claims against her estate. Oliver had been following the proceedings with the intense focus he brought to everything that captured his interest, and I could see him processing the reality that his parents would be in federal prison until he was nearly 17 years old. Grandma Gigi, he whispered, do you think they understand now why what they did was wrong? I think they understand that it was illegal and that it had serious consequences. Whether they understand why it was morally wrong is something they'll have to figure out during their time in prison. The past 3 months had been a period of reconstruction and healing that would have been impossible without William's support and guidance. He had helped me navigate the complex emotions of family betrayal while simultaneously learning to trust him with aspects of my life that I had been hiding for our entire relationship. Griselda, William had said during one of our many conversations about rebuilding after trauma, I understand that discovering your family's conspiracy has made it difficult to trust anyone's motivations. But I need you to know that my feelings for you have nothing to do with your financial situation and everything to do with your intelligence, humor, and strength of character. How can I be sure of that when I was so wrong about Marcus and Claudia's motivations? Because you can observe my behavior over time and evaluate whether my actions demonstrate genuine care or opportunistic manipulation. And because you have Oliver's technological skills available to investigate anyone whose intentions you want to verify. The suggestion had been made with humor, but Oliver had taken it seriously and spent several weeks conducting what he called background verification research on William's financial situation, family relationships, and professional reputation. Grandma Gigi, Judge Sterling is actually wealthier than you are, Oliver had announced after completing his investigation. His retirement investments and federal pension mean he doesn't need your money, and his family relationships all seem healthy and honest. I think his motivations for dating you are genuine. Oliver, you researched William's personal finances? I wanted to make sure he wasn't trying to take advantage of you like Mom, Dad, and Uncle Thomas were. But all the evidence suggests that he really cares about you for who you are, rather than what you have. William's daughter Rebecca had become an unexpected ally during this period, providing professional counseling support for Oliver, while also helping me understand how to rebuild family relationships based on honesty rather than performance. Mrs. Blackwood, Rebecca had explained during one of our sessions, Oliver's discovery of his parents' conspiracy has actually freed him from family dynamics that were already unhealthy. Children in manipulative households often develop anxiety about their own judgment and their ability to trust adult authority figures. And now Oliver has concrete evidence that his instincts about protecting you were correct, and that standing up for what's right sometimes requires opposing people you love. That's an incredibly valuable life lesson, even though it came through traumatic circumstances. The criminal sentencing concluded with victim impact statements that allowed me to address my family directly for the first time since their arrest. Marcus, Claudia, Thomas, I said, standing at the victim's podium with the kind of composure that 30 years of hotel management had taught me to maintain during difficult situations. I want you to understand the impact of what you attempted to do to me. You weren't just planning to steal my money or control my property. You were planning to erase my identity as an independent adult and confine me to an institution for people with severe dementia, based entirely on evidence you had fabricated. Marcus was crying as I spoke, but I couldn't tell whether his tears reflected genuine remorse or self-pity about the consequences of his criminal behavior. You made me doubt my own judgment and question my mental competence because I trusted you to tell me the truth about your concerns. You turned my love for my family into a weapon that could have been used to destroy my freedom and dignity. But most importantly, you forced a 12-year-old child to choose between protecting his parents and protecting his grandmother from fraud. Oliver will carry the emotional burden of exposing your criminal behavior for the rest of his life, not because he made the wrong choice, but because you put him in a position where any choice would be traumatic. I concluded my statement with information that surprised everyone in the courtroom, including William. I am donating the restitution money you've been ordered to pay to a foundation that protects elderly people from family financial exploitation. Oliver and I are also developing educational programs that teach older adults how to recognize the signs of conspiracy and manipulation by relatives who view inheritance as an entitlement rather than a gift. After the sentencing, Oliver and I drove home to the house that had become our shared sanctuary, where he was developing cybersecurity skills while finishing high school through an accelerated program that recognized his exceptional abilities. Grandma Gigi, do you miss having a normal family? Oliver, we have a normal family. It's just structured differently than most families because we chose each other based on love and respect rather than being stuck with each other through genetics and obligation. What about Judge Sterling? Is he part of our family now? William is part of our family in the way that matters most. He's someone who consistently demonstrates care for our welfare and makes our lives better through his presence. Are you going to marry him? The question had been on my mind for weeks, particularly since William had begun making references to our future together and long-term planning that suggested he was thinking about permanent rather than temporary partnership. I might, sweetheart. How would you feel about that? I think it would be great. Judge Sterling is smart and honest, and he helped save you from Mom, Dad, and Uncle Thomas. Plus, Rebecca is really nice, and it would be cool to have a stepsister who's a psychologist. That evening, William arrived for dinner carrying flowers and wearing the expression of someone who had something important to discuss. Griselda, I have a question to ask you, and I want Oliver to be part of this conversation because any decision I make about our future affects him too. What kind of question? William reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box that made my heart skip several beats. I want to ask if you would be willing to marry me, knowing that marriage would mean combining our families, our resources, and our plans for whatever years we have remaining. And I want to ask Oliver if he would be comfortable having me as his step-grandfather, knowing that I would take seriously the responsibility of helping raise him and support his education and career development. Oliver looked at the ring box, then at William, then at me, processing the implications of what was being proposed. Judge Sterling, would marrying Grandma Gigi mean that I would have a family that's based on people choosing to be together instead of people being stuck with each other? That's exactly what it would mean, Oliver. Then I think you should definitely get married, and I think you should do it soon, before any other criminals try to mess up our family. Some marriage proposals happen in romantic restaurants or exotic vacation destinations. My marriage proposal happened in my kitchen with my 12-year-old grandson serving as witness and advisor, and it was perfect. 6 months later, I stood in the garden behind William's house, our house now, watching Oliver demonstrate his latest technological creation to a gathering of federal law enforcement officials, academic researchers, and elderly advocacy groups. He had developed what he called the Family Truth Verification System, a smartphone app designed to help older adults detect deepfake photos and verify the credentials of medical professionals. The app uses artificial intelligence to analyze facial inconsistencies that indicate photo manipulation, Oliver explained to his rapt audience with the confidence of someone who had discovered his life's calling at age 13. It can also cross-reference medical license databases to verify doctor credentials in real time. William squeezed my hand as we watched our grandson, for that's how I now thought of Oliver, as our shared family rather than just my biological relative. Field questions from FBI cybercrime specialists about the technical specifications of his anti-fraud software. He's remarkable. whispered Dr. Sarah Chen, director of the National Center on Elder Abuse, who had traveled from Washington specifically to evaluate Oliver's work. Most cybersecurity professionals with decades of experience couldn't have created something this sophisticated. Oliver had strong motivation to solve the problem, I replied. Nothing focuses the mind quite like discovering that your own parents were using technology to commit crimes against someone you love. The past 6 months had transformed our unconventional family unit into something that felt both stable and purposeful. William and I had married in a quiet ceremony attended by Oliver, Rebecca's family, and a handful of friends who understood that love at our age was precious precisely because it was unexpected. Oliver had settled into his new life with the resilience that children often demonstrate when removed from dysfunctional situations and placed in environments that prioritize their well-being. "Mrs. Sterling," said Agent Martinez, approaching with the kind of professional respect that suggested he viewed me as a colleague rather than a victim. "Oliver's app has already helped us identify 3 other cases of family fraud involving fabricated medical evidence. The FBI would like to discuss funding his further research through our cybercrime prevention initiative." "That's wonderful news. Oliver will be thrilled. And we'd like to discuss your foundation's educational programs. The workshops you've developed about recognizing family financial exploitation are exactly what we need to help vulnerable adults protect themselves." The Blackwood Sterling Foundation for Elder Protection had become my full-time occupation since the criminal trials concluded, providing me with purposeful work that transformed my traumatic experience into resources for protecting other people from similar betrayals. Working with Oliver on the technological aspects and with William on the legal framework had created a family business that aligned our different areas of expertise toward a common goal. "Grandma Gigi," Oliver called from across the garden, where he was still surrounded by interested professionals. "Can you come explain the psychological aspects of family fraud detection? The FBI agents want to understand how victims can learn to trust their instincts about manipulation." I excused myself from Agent Martinez and walked toward the group gathered around Oliver, marveling at how completely our lives had been reconstructed since that evening when a 12-year-old's hacking experiment had exposed 6 months of criminal conspiracy. "The most important thing to understand about family financial exploitation," I told the assembled experts, "is that victims often have accurate instincts about manipulation, but they suppress those instincts because they don't want to believe that family members could be capable of such betrayal." "What changed your ability to recognize the warning signs?" asked Dr. Chen, having concrete evidence that validated my suspicions. "For months, I had been feeling uncomfortable about my family's increased interest in my finances and their suggestions about appropriate behavior for someone my age, but I dismissed those feelings as paranoia or oversensitivity." "Oliver's digital evidence gave you permission to trust your own judgment?" "Oliver's evidence proved that my discomfort was based on accurate perception of actual threats rather than irrational fears about imaginary problems." Dr. Martinez nodded with understanding. "That's why Oliver's app is so valuable. It provides objective verification that can help elderly adults trust their instincts about suspicious situations." The discussion continued for another hour, with federal officials, researchers, and advocacy professionals exploring how technology could be used to protect vulnerable populations from the kind of sophisticated fraud my family had attempted. Oliver answered technical questions with impressive expertise, while I provided insights about the psychological dynamics that made such exploitation possible. As the gathering concluded and our guests began leaving, William found me in our kitchen preparing dinner with the kind of domestic contentment that I hadn't experienced since the early years of my marriage to Harold. "How are you feeling about today's success?" he asked, helping me arrange vegetables for roasting. "Proud of Oliver, grateful for the Foundation's impact, and amazed by how completely our lives have changed since that terrible birthday dinner." "Do you ever regret that the conspiracy was exposed? Would you have preferred to maintain relationships with Marcus, Claudia, and Thomas, even if those relationships were based on deception?" The question was one I had been wrestling with during quiet moments over the past months, particularly when I received occasional letters from Marcus in federal prison expressing what appeared to be genuine remorse for his actions. I regret that my family was capable of such calculated cruelty, but I don't regret that their conspiracy was exposed before it could succeed. And personally, Do you regret that our relationship had to be revealed under such dramatic circumstances? William, I regret that I was afraid to introduce you to my family when you were the best thing that had happened to me in years. But I'm grateful that crisis forced me to trust you with problems I couldn't solve alone. You know that I would have helped you regardless of whether our relationship was public or private, don't you? I know that now. But at the time, I was so afraid of being judged for having romantic feelings at my age that I couldn't see how isolation was making me more vulnerable to exploitation rather than protecting me from embarrassment. Oliver joined us in the kitchen carrying his laptop and wearing the expression of someone who had exciting news to share. Grandma Gigi, Judge William, I just got an email from the FBI Cybercrime Division. They want to offer me a summer internship next year, and they want to discuss scholarship programs for cybersecurity students who are interested in protecting vulnerable populations. Oliver, that's extraordinary. How do you feel about working with the FBI? I think it would be amazing. I could learn advanced techniques for detecting digital fraud, and I could help develop better tools for protecting people like you from criminals like my parents. The casual way Oliver referred to Marcus and Claudia as criminals rather than parents reflected how completely he had processed their betrayal and moved forward with his life. He maintained no illusions about their motivations or their behavior, but he also showed no signs of the emotional damage that might have been expected from a child whose family had been destroyed by criminal prosecution. Oliver, William said, settling into the kitchen chair beside him, I want you to know how proud I am of the integrity you showed in protecting your grandmother, and how impressed I am with the work you're doing to help other families avoid similar betrayals. Thanks, Judge William. I'm proud that we're a family that protects each other instead of a family that hurts each other for money. That evening, after Oliver had gone to his room to work on homework and technology projects, William and I sat in our living room, reflecting on the journey that had brought us from secret romance to public marriage, to family advocates working together to prevent elder abuse. Griselda, what do you think Harold would say about our life together? The question surprised me, both because William rarely mentioned my late husband, and because I realized I had been thinking about Harold's likely reaction to recent events. I think Harold would be proud that I found love again, grateful that Oliver has stable family support, and satisfied that I'm using my experience to help other people avoid similar trauma. And what do you think he would say about me? I think he would appreciate that you see me as a complete person rather than just a wealthy widow, and that you've been willing to share both my problems and my resources to create something meaningful together. Some second marriages are consolation prizes for people who couldn't make their first marriages work. Our second marriage had become a partnership that was stronger and more purposeful than either of us had ever experienced, built on honesty, mutual respect, and shared commitment to protecting vulnerable people from the kind of betrayal that had brought us together. And every day, as we worked with Oliver on projects that transformed criminal exploitation into educational protection, we proved that love at any age could create family connections more powerful than genetics, greed, or social expectations. 1 year after our wedding, I stood at the podium of the National Conference on Elder Protection, looking out at an audience of 300 federal agents, social workers, legal professionals, and family advocates who had gathered to learn about preventing the kind of sophisticated fraud that had nearly destroyed my independence. Oliver sat in the front row beside William, now 14 years old and already recognized as one of the country's youngest experts in digital fraud detection. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, when my grandson accidentally discovered that my own family had been planning to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized based on fabricated evidence, I learned that the greatest threats to elderly adults often come from the people we trust most. The past year had transformed my traumatic experience into a national advocacy platform that was changing how law enforcement, healthcare professionals, and social services agencies approached family financial exploitation. The Blackwood Sterling Foundation had become a leading resource for education and prevention, while Oliver's technological innovations were being implemented by elder protection agencies across the country. The conspiracy against me wasn't motivated by concern for my welfare or confusion about my mental capacity, I continued. It was motivated by impatience with my financial independence and resentment about my personal relationships that interfered with inheritance expectations. In the audience, I could see Agent Martinez and Dr. Chen, who had become close colleagues in our shared work to protect vulnerable adults from family manipulation. Both had contributed research and resources that had expanded our foundation's impact far beyond what William and I could have achieved independently. My family used cutting-edge technology to manufacture evidence of cognitive decline, hired professional actors to provide fraudulent medical evaluations, and coordinated their deception with legal and financial institutions that would have enabled my institutionalization within hours of their fake diagnosis. The technical sophistication of the conspiracy continued to shock professionals who understood how such tactics could be replicated by other families seeking to exploit elderly relatives. Oliver's counter-technology had become essential for detecting and preventing similar frauds before they could succeed. But what saved me wasn't superior financial resources or legal connections. What saved me was a 12-year-old boy who had been taught to value honesty over family loyalty, and who chose to protect his grandmother rather than enable his parents' criminal behavior. The applause that followed was sustained and emotional, recognizing Oliver's extraordinary courage in exposing his own parents' conspiracy. He had become something of a celebrity in cybersecurity and elder advocacy circles, but he wore his recognition with the kind of humble competence that suggested he understood the seriousness of the problems he was helping to solve. "Oliver Blackwood Sterling," I said, using the hyphenated surname he had chosen after our family reconfiguration. "Would you please join me to demonstrate the latest version of the Family Truth Verification System?" Oliver approached the podium carrying his laptop and the kind of confident ease that comes from having presented his work to FBI directors, congressional committees, and international cybersecurity conferences over the past year. "Thank you, Grandma Gigi." Ladies and gentlemen, the FTVS app now includes facial recognition technology that can detect deepfake manipulation in real time, database integration that verifies medical and legal credentials instantly, and behavioral analysis algorithms that identify suspicious patterns in family communication. "Can you show us how the deepfake detection works?" asked someone from the audience. "Sure. Here's one of the fake photos that my parents created to make Grandma Gigi look confused and disoriented." Oliver projected the manipulated image onto the conference screens, showing the altered version of my face that had been designed to suggest cognitive impairment. The app analyzes facial geometry, skin texture, and lighting patterns to identify artificial modifications. Watch what happens when I run the detection algorithm. Within seconds, the app highlighted inconsistencies in the image that revealed digital manipulation, providing evidence that would be admissible in court proceedings and understandable to laypeople who might be victims of similar deception. And here's the credential verification feature. If someone claiming to be Dr. Harrison tries to evaluate your mental capacity, you can check their medical license status immediately. Oliver demonstrated how the app would have exposed James McCarthy as an unlicensed actor rather than a board-certified physician, preventing the fraudulent medical evaluation that had been central to my family's conspiracy. The app also monitors communication patterns on smartphones and computers to identify coordinated deception by multiple family members. If your relatives are planning your institutionalization through group chats and deleted messages, the FTVS will detect and document that activity. The presentation continued with testimonials from elderly adults who had used Oliver's technology to protect themselves from family exploitation, law enforcement officials who had used the evidence-gathering features to prosecute fraud cases, and healthcare professionals who had learned to verify their own credentials to protect patients from imposters. "Dr. Sterling," called Dr. Chen from the audience, "how has this advocacy work affected your family relationships and your marriage to someone 30 years younger than your previous life experience?" William stood to answer the question, and I was struck again by how distinguished and confident he appeared when discussing our unconventional family structure. "Dr. Chen, marrying Griselda has given me the opportunity to combine my legal expertise with her business acumen and Oliver's technological skills to create something more meaningful than any of us could achieve independently." "And the age difference? The circumstances that brought you together?" "The age difference is irrelevant when you're building a partnership based on shared values and complementary abilities. And the circumstances that brought us together, Griselda's need for legal help and my ability to provide it, demonstrated that our relationship was based on mutual support rather than opportunistic exploitation. What about you, Oliver? How has your family situation affected your educational and career development? Oliver approached the microphone with the poise that had impressed federal officials and international cybersecurity experts throughout our year of advocacy work. My biological parents taught me that family relationships can be used to hurt people if you care more about money than about protecting the people you're supposed to love. Grandma Gigi and Judge William have taught me that family relationships can be used to help people when you care more about doing what's right than about what's convenient or profitable. And professionally? I want to work for the FBI's cybercrime division to help protect vulnerable people from the kind of technological manipulation that was used against my grandmother. I also want to continue developing software that helps elderly adults maintain their independence and security. The conference concluded with the announcement of new federal funding for elder protection programs, expanded training requirements for healthcare professionals who evaluate cognitive capacity, and legislative proposals that would strengthen criminal penalties for family financial exploitation involving technological deception. As we left the conference venue, I reflected on how completely our lives had been transformed by Oliver's accidental discovery of Marcus and Claudia's conspiracy 18 months earlier. "William," I said as we walked toward our car, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if Oliver hadn't hacked into Claudia's phone that weekend? I think you would have been institutionalized based on fabricated evidence. Your assets would have been liquidated by people who viewed your independence as an obstacle to their inheritance, and we would never have had the opportunity to build the relationship we have now." So Oliver's technological curiosity and ethical integrity saved both my freedom and our marriage. Oliver's courage saved your freedom. Our marriage was saved by your willingness to trust me with problems you couldn't solve alone, despite your fears about family judgment. My 12-year-old grandson hacked his mother's phone for fun and discovered a family group chat called Operation Get Rid of Griselda with 2,147 messages planning to declare me incompetent using deepfake photos and a fake doctor. My son, daughter-in-law, and brother had been conspiring for 6 months to steal my $180 million fortune by having me institutionalized in a memory care facility. When I called the man I'd been secretly dating for 8 months, a retired federal judge I'd met at my hotel, he helped me turn their fake birthday celebration into a federal sting operation. Sometimes the relationship you hide from family judgment becomes the one that saves you from family betrayal. At 76 years old, I had learned that family isn't defined by genetics or legal relationships, but by the willingness to protect each other from harm rather than exploit each other for gain. Oliver had chosen to protect his grandmother over his parents' criminal conspiracy. William had chosen to risk public exposure of our private relationship to help me fight federal fraud charges. And I had finally learned to trust my instincts about people's motivations rather than suppressing my judgment, to preserve relationships that were based on deception rather than genuine affection. Our unconventional family, a 76-year-old former hotel owner, a 69-year-old retired federal judge, and a 14-year-old cybersecurity prodigy, had become stronger through crisis than any traditional family structure built on obligation and assumption. And every day, as we continued our work protecting vulnerable adults from the kind of betrayal that had brought us together, we proved that love, integrity, and mutual protection could create family bonds more powerful than blood, greed, or social expectations about appropriate behavior at any age. Some families are born, others are chosen. The family we had chosen was worth fighting for, worth protecting, and worth celebrating in ways that my biological relatives never could have understood or appreciated. The end.